The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Nothing urgent in the subject line, just a quiet notification in my inbox. Final transfer, Elman Company. It came from Knox and Associates, the law firm my father had worked with for years. I wasn't the intended recipient, just copied in, maybe by accident, maybe not. Out of habit, I opened it, expecting nothing of importance, but then I hit paragraph 3. Effective January 1st, full operational control, equity transfer, and brand title of Elman Company will be reassigned to Ms. Chloe Ellison. I read it again, then again, just to be sure I hadn't misread it. My name wasn't mentioned at all, not in the transfer, not in the acknowledgements, not even in the CC line. This wasn't a mistake. I hadn't been forgotten, I'd been erased. I sat still, not in shock, exactly, more like the stunned quiet after falling hard, when you haven't started hurting yet, but you know it's coming. It didn't add up, or maybe it added up too well. For 7 years, I had given everything to that company. What began as a dusty little dry goods shop in Vermont had become a multi-million-dollar lifestyle brand. I built the product line, I hired the team, I sourced the packaging and set up the supplier network. The shift to organic? That was me. The rebrand? Me. The COVID survival plan? Also me. I still remember pitching our first investor strategy while Dad sat silently 2 seats away. And now it belonged to Chloe. Chloe, my younger sister, the one who once said, "I don't get why you care so much about soap." She'd returned 2 years ago from spiritual travel, posted a few Instagram photos outside the store, and somehow ended up head of community. At first, I laughed, then I stopped when Dad started putting her on calls, when she began speaking on behalf of the brand. "She's fresh," he told me, "she has the kind of energy investors like." I showed him the numbers, he smiled. That email, that quiet little email, was the final confirmation. I didn't respond, didn't forward it, didn't tell anyone. I just closed my laptop and stared at the wall. One question echoed. When did they decide I didn't matter anymore? And a harder one. Why did they think I wouldn't fight back? Still silent, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, my original archive from the early days, before we called it a brand, back when it was just the shop. Inside were old brand files, mock-ups, contracts, notes scribbled on flights, logo drafts drawn on napkins. This wasn't nostalgia, this was proof. I had always been the one to keep records. I found the first logo, the one I created in a coffee shop after a buyer said our packaging was forgettable. I stayed up that night learning Illustrator, trying to design something that felt grounded and real. Soft letters, a curling ampersand, rooted, personal, mine. Dad said it looked too handmade. I convinced him to test it anyway. Wholesale orders tripled in 3 months. I checked the current website. The ampersand? Gone. Everything I built? Replaced. New logo, new name, new voice. Under our journey, the story began in 2021. No photos from the early days, no mention of the original store, nothing about the years we packed boxes by hand. Just, Elma Studio was founded by Chloe Ellison as a space for intentional beauty and mindful design. I searched for my name, nothing. The blog? Nothing. The article I wrote about our early sourcing? Gone. Even my quote, once printed inside every box, was replaced by Chloe's. "I want every product to feel like light in your hands." I opened her LinkedIn. Founder and CEO, Elma Studio. Public speaker, brand visionary. In a video clip, she held up the soap I spent 3 winters perfecting, the one we used to call Snow Day. She smiled and said, "This one's my favorite. I made it for my mom." I watched quietly as she described the scent like it came from her childhood, not mine. They hadn't just taken the company. They had rewritten its entire story. They stole the look, the language, the spirit, but erased the fingerprints. In the latest investor deck, the timeline began in 2021. It listed our first major retail deal, which I closed in 2019. The sustainability shift, my lockdown project. And a brand new name. I thought about something Dad once said during a long night at the office. No one remembers who poured the concrete, they just see the windows. Back then, I thought he meant we were a team. Now I know what he really meant. He never planned to build the story with me, he built it on top of me. I didn't call my father, I didn't reply to Chloe's text, I didn't draft a long email or request a meeting, I didn't ask why they erased me. I already knew the answer. They didn't think I'd fight back. They thought I'd do what I always did, let it slide. work harder, quietly shoulder the weight. But this time, I wasn't carrying anything for them. I started walking backward, not in regret, but in precision, brick by brick, memory by memory. The first thing I did was check the lease on the original Elm and Company storefront, the one on Main Street with the peeling brick facade and creaky wooden floors I used to mop myself. It had changed hands when we expanded, rolled into a shell company Dad and I had set up years ago. I remembered the LLC name. It only took 5 minutes to look it up and 10 to realize the lease was expiring in 30 days. The next morning, I drove out. The street hadn't changed much. Same hand-painted signs, same faded cafe on the corner, same couple arguing outside the laundromat. The shop windows were empty now. The new flagship was across town, but I could still see the tape marks where I used to hang promotional flyers. I parked and went straight to the leasing office. Linda was still there. She'd been the one to approve our first lease when I was 23 and too nervous to look anyone in the eye. She blinked when she saw me. "Mara Ellison," she said, half smiling. "It's been a while." I told her I was interested in the space again. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought your sister was running things now." "She is?" I said. Linda paused for a beat, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "Well, that space is about to be available again. Payment lapsed. I don't think they're keeping it." I signed the paperwork that afternoon. I walked through the empty store. The lighting was poor. The floor still creaked near the back storage room. The counter still had stains from when I spilled candle dye during our second product test. They never came out. I ran my hand along the wall where I used to write delivery notes in pencil, light enough to erase, but dark enough to see when the sunlight hit just right. Next, I reached out to our first lavender supplier, a family farm up north. I still had the daughter's number saved in an old folder. I called her. She remembered me. "Your sister's people stopped ordering from us last year," she said. "They were going global." I asked if they'd work with me again. She said yes. Then, I tracked down Martin, the printer who ran our first ever batch of labels. I still remembered the layout error from batch 1, the scent name had bled too close to the edge. I drove to his warehouse. He hadn't changed a bit. "You want the old files?" he asked. "Nobody ever came back for them." I took them. By Friday, I had the lease, the supplier, the packaging, and the original design files, everything under my name. I didn't post about it, didn't make a big announcement. This wasn't a comeback. I wasn't building something new. I was rebuilding what should never have been abandoned. Not because I wanted the world to see it, but because I needed it to exist somewhere, unburied beneath all the polish and press photos. They had the name, the followers, the packaging, but I had the scaffolding, the people, and the smell of cedar oil that stuck to my coat in winter. That was enough. The first call came 3 days after I signed the lease. Dad's name lit up on my phone like it had so many times before, during build-outs, supplier delays, late-night margin checks when we still did everything ourselves. I didn't answer. He called again the next day and left a voicemail. "Hey Mara, just wondering how you're doing. Haven't heard from you. Give me a call." I didn't. Instead, I drove to the shop and stood behind the old register. I ran a dry cloth over the wood, even though there was no dust yet. I rewired the back lights, replaced a broken drawer pull that had been loose since year 2. Small things no one else would notice, but I did, because I had put them there. 2 more calls came that week, one from my mother. She never called. Her message was short. "Whatever this is, you're making things harder than they need to be." I let it sit. I didn't answer her texts either. Chloe sent the first one. "What are you doing at the Main Street space?" No greeting, no confusion, just a direct shot. It wasn't curiosity, it was fear. I didn't answer. Then came the letter, a clean PDF from their legal team, addressed to my business. It was a courtesy inquiry, asking if my new activity was an attempt to commercially compete using overlapping brand assets. I printed it out, left it on the table, and drank my coffee. I read it again slowly, aloud, to hear how it sounded. Then I replied, 1 page, simple. The physical property at 118 Main Street, as well as product formulations, visual design templates, and original copy language, were developed and filed under my name between 2016 and 2020. Any overlap results from your continued use of materials that predate current leadership. Please direct future communication to counsel. I mailed it, certified, tracked. The calls stopped for a few days, then Chloe showed up in person. I was restocking tea tins on the back wall when I heard the door open. She walked in like she'd been sent, clean lines, polished voice. Mara, she said, we need to talk. I stood, wiped my hands. You're here now? I asked. After 2 years of talking for me, she didn't answer that. She glanced around the store. You're rebuilding it, I said. I'm remembering it. She exhaled, frustrated, maybe just unsure. Dad says you're trying to tear it all down. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't afraid of me, she was afraid I'd make people remember the version of the story where she wasn't in it. I'm not trying to tear it down, I said, I'm just taking back the parts you didn't know were real. She didn't respond, she left without touching anything. I went back to shelving tins, 1 row at a time. They didn't take me seriously, not really, even after I reopened the old store, even after I stocked the shelves with familiar shapes and scents, even after I stood behind the same counter they once called too small town for a national brand. They thought I was making noise, a symbolic protest from the bitter sister who couldn't move on. Maybe they expected me to lash out, demand a seat back at the table, but I wasn't interested in their table. I had already built the floor they put it on, I just needed them to remember that. The second legal letter came a few days later, signed by an attorney I didn't recognize. It wasn't friendly, it accused me of infringing on intellectual property, product names, scent formulas, packaging layouts. They said my new store was confusing their brand identity, dressed up in legal jargon. The message was clear, you're trespassing on what we built. What they didn't realize was that I never left. I didn't panic, I didn't get angry. Instead, I walked to the back office, opened the file drawer labeled Legal, 2016, and pulled out the documents they forgot existed. There it was, a notarized agreement, signed by my father and me, listing every original formulation, every design, every phrase used in our first 3 years. Ownership, mine. It wasn't just a creative folder, it was the foundation, and they never transferred it. Back then, Dad had said we didn't need a lawyer. He thought it was better for me to hold the original documents until we figured out how big this was going to get. We never followed up, and they never asked for the transfer, so I filed everything under my name, quietly, permanently. I put together my reply, 1 packet, neat and thorough, annotated. I listed what I owned. The lavender and citrus blend we called Rainlight. The original Ritual Care tagline still printed on their boxes. The layout templates I created in PowerPoint when we couldn't afford a designer. I cited registration numbers, included timelines, then, I added 1 sentence, centered and bold. You have 14 calendar days to discontinue use of the attached intellectual property. Failure to comply will constitute willful infringement under federal law. I sent it by courier, certified, no email, no heads up. 4 days passed, then 7. On the 9th day, a junior lawyer from their side called, asking if I'd consider a licensing agreement, a legacy partnership, he called it, said they wanted to honor the roots. I said no, politely, no explanation, just no. Day 12, Chloe posted a video. She stood in a neutral-toned studio with soft music playing behind her. We are entering a new chapter, she said, a reimagined brand that reflects who we are now, not where we began. The caption was full of buzzwords, growth, forward vision, but what I saw was something else, withdrawal. Over the next month, their packaging changed, the copy softened, the names disappeared, the labels got cleaner but emptier. One by one, the things I made stopped showing up in their feed. There were no announcements, no headlines, but I knew what it meant. I didn't sue, I didn't go public, I didn't send a final message or leak a single file. I just watched as they erased what they once took quietly and completely, because they no longer had the right to hold it. I never wanted to destroy what they built, I only wanted them to stop building it on top of me. The rebrand happened quietly, no public apology, no announcement of rights transferred or names removed, just new packaging, new language, a reshuffled website. Elma Studio became Studio Elma, the shelves looked cleaner, the copy sounded vaguer, the core faded. They moved on, and I let them. I didn't respond to the lawyer's final offer. I didn't check the trademark filings to see how much they had changed. I didn't walk past the flagship store again. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't whether people knew what I did, it was that they couldn't pretend I hadn't done it. About a month later, a package arrived at the store, no return address. Inside was the black moleskin notebook I thought I'd lost in year 3, the one I filled with scent ratios, price projections, and small sketches in the margins. On the inside cover, in my handwriting, was a line I'd written during a snowstorm when we couldn't afford a generator and worked by candlelight. If we ever forget how this started, We lose the right to say what it is. There was no note, but the postmark said Portland. I put the notebook in the drawer under the register, not to keep it safe, just to keep it near. That spring, the shop filled slowly. A few locals remembered it. A college student wandered in looking for something for her mother. An older man recognized the smell and said, "Didn't this place used to carry that cedar soap?" I nodded. "We still do." He smiled, picked up a bar, held it to his nose. "Smells like the old days." I didn't explain, didn't need to. I restocked the shelves, cleaned the back room, replanted the herb box near the window. I ordered another round of labels, same design, no logo this time, no tagline. One morning, as I was opening up, a woman stood outside the door. She hesitated before coming in. She looked around slowly, touched the wooden counter, scanned the shelves like she was looking for something she couldn't name. After a while, she asked, "Is this new?" I smiled. "Not really." She nodded, bought a candle, and didn't ask for a bag. As she left, she paused and said, "It feels like something that remembers." And maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not credit, not revenge, not even recognition. Just a place where the version of the story I lived, the one I built, was still alive, untouched by edits, something that remembered.